The morning sun spilled a thin gold ribbon across my kitchen counter as I stood frozen, phone still warm in my hand. The message glowed on the screen like a verdict. Dad, you're not welcome at Lily's birthday if Claire is coming. For a heartbeat, I thought I'd misread it. I set the phone down beside my half-empty mug, the steam already fading. The scent of dark roast mingled with the soft citrus of the lemon polish I'd wiped across the counters an hour ago. Everything looked so composed, my life, my home, me. And yet my father's words sliced through that careful order like a cold knife. I pressed my palm against the cool marble. My silk blouse clung lightly to my skin. I hadn't realized how warm I'd become. My wife, Claire, was upstairs wrapping the last of Lily's presents, probably humming under her breath. She had no idea what had just landed in my world. It wasn't the first time my dad tried to draw lines in sand, but this one hurt deeper. My daughter's birthday. Our daughters. And all because my wife had dared what? To introduce the success we'd built together, to tell a story that somehow threatened the narrow world he clung to. I swallowed hard, the taste of bitterness and old memories rising. Part of me wanted to call back and scream. Another part, older, steadier, knew this fight had begun years ago. Long before Claire. Long before Lily. I was 19 the last time I truly believed my father's approval was something I could earn. It was the summer before my sophomore year at Northwestern, and the air in our Indiana farmhouse felt heavy with unspoken rules. Dad had just come in from the fields when I told him I was switching my major from business administration to creative writing. He set his battered John Deere cap on the counter, eyes narrowing like storm clouds. Writing, he said, the word landing like a slur. You don't build a life on stories. I can still feel the grit of the countertop under my trembling fingers. My throat tightened so hard I almost couldn't speak. I want to tell people stories, Dad. That's what I'm good at. He turned away, poured himself a mug of black coffee. You're good at wasting time. Mom hovered near the sink, her eyes darting between us. She had always been the quiet buffer, but that day she stayed silent. It wasn't just about the major, though he pretended it was. He'd been sniffing out my difference for years. The softball teammates I admired a little too much, the way I cut my hair shorter every spring. That night, when the house finally stilled, I sat cross-legged on my childhood bed, my heart pounding with the weight of words I'd never said aloud. I like girls. My grandmother, who'd passed the year before, had left me her silver locket, a small oval with a single pressed violet inside. I remember opening it, the flower brittle but perfectly shaped. On the back, etched so faintly you had to catch the light, were her words. Live true. I traced the engraving with my thumb until my skin warmed the metal. Something inside me, quiet but unshakable, settled. The next morning, I packed a single duffel bag. Mom met me at the door, eyes red but voice steady. Your grandmother would be proud, Sam, she whispered, slipping the locket's chain around my neck. Dad didn't come out of his room. I stepped into the humid August dawn, the sky streaked with lavender and gold. My chest hurt from the goodbye I wasn't allowed to say, but beneath the ache pulsed a fierce resolve. I wasn't just leaving for college. I was leaving to become the woman my grandmother already believed I could be. Chicago's skyline became my compass in those first lonely months. From the dorm window, the towers glittered like a promise I wasn't sure I deserved. I juggled 3 part-time jobs, copying papers in the campus library, brewing coffee until my hair smelled permanently of espresso, and transcribing interviews for a local newspaper, just to keep tuition paid and rent covered. Every night, I came back to my tiny studio with aching feet and ink smudges on my wrists. I drop my bag, touch the silver locket at my throat, and whisper my grandmother's words. Live true. The violet inside was fading, but the metal stayed warm against my skin, like a quiet heartbeat that kept me going. I graduated with more determination than savings. My first real break came when a veteran journalist named Margaret Green, 40 years in the field, her voice gravelly from decades of newsroom coffee, noticed the way I stayed late, polishing articles no one else would touch. You've got grit, Brooks, she said one midnight, sliding a red ink draft back to me. and a voice worth reading. Don't waste it hiding. Margaret became my anchor. She taught me how to dig for truth in city records, how to coax a story from reluctant voices, and, most importantly, how to write like the world was listening. When I finally published my first long-form investigative piece about a crooked real estate deal in the South Loop, it went viral overnight. Checks started arriving, first small, then startling. A magazine offered me a contract. By 25, I had my own column. By 27, a book deal. I poured every cent into a modest brick townhouse near Lake Michigan, choosing a quiet street where the morning sun hit the windows just right. All the while, my relationship with my father dwindled to holiday texts and the occasional clipped phone call. He asked polite questions. Work going okay? But never pressed for details. I never offered any. It was easier to let him imagine I was scraping by than to expose the life he'd once said I could never build. And then there was Claire. We met at a book launch where I'd been scheduled to speak. She was a marketing strategist with an easy laugh and a confidence that filled every room. I still remember the first time she handed me a cup of coffee, the scent of cinnamon floating between us like a secret. Claire believed in my words before I believed in myself. We spent long nights sharing edits and dreams, our fingers brushing over glowing laptop screens. Within 2 years, we were married in a quiet ceremony by the lake, just a handful of friends, Margaret beaming in the front row. Together, we built not just a marriage, but a venture, a boutique media firm that specialized in investigative storytelling for nonprofits and grassroots movements. The contracts grew bigger. Our name became quietly respected, though never flashy. I posted only the simplest updates for family, photos of Lake Michigan sunsets, Lily's first smile, never the glossy magazine covers, never the revenue figures. My success remained hidden, not from fear of failure, but from the ache of knowing my father would see it not as triumph, but as betrayal. Claire insisted we keep Lily's party exactly as planned. Your dad will either show or he won't, she said, her hand warm over mine as we arranged pastel plates across the long oak table. Balloons bobbed against the vaulted ceiling of the rented lakeside hall, their ribbons whispering against the beams like restless thoughts. I tried to focus on the details, the scent of vanilla frosting, the sparkle of the lake through wide glass windows, but the text from Dad throbbed like a bruise at the edge of my mind. You're not welcome if Claire speaks. When he finally arrived, late as always, I caught his reflection in the window before I heard the door close. Broad shoulders still unbent by age, jaw set in that familiar, stubborn line. Mom trailed behind him, her purse clutched like a shield. Hi, Dad, I said, keeping my voice even. He gave a curt nod, his eyes skimming past me to Lily, who was giggling in a cloud of pink tulle near the cake table. For a moment, tenderness softened his face, then it hardened again when he noticed Claire, clipboard in hand, talking to the photographer. Claire approached with a gentle smile. Mr. Brooks, I'm so glad you came. We're just about to start. He lifted a hand. I came for Lily, not for speeches about success stories. The room stilled. Even the chatter of children quieted, as though the air itself had turned heavy. I stepped closer, feeling the locket's weight at my throat. What exactly is it you're afraid of, Dad? That people might know your daughter and her wife built something worth celebrating? He flinched as if I'd struck him. You think I care about money? About. This isn't about money. My voice steadied, stronger than I expected. It's about the life you said I'd never make. The one you tried to keep me from by shutting me out. I motioned toward the far wall, where Claire had quietly set up a display of photos and clippings, our firm's projects over the past 5 years. Portraits of families we'd helped, nonprofits we'd saved from collapse, a Pulitzer plaque mounted in simple walnut. Gasps rippled through the guests. My father turned, eyes locking on the plaque. His mouth opened, closed. That's yours, he finally whispered. Ours, I said. Claire and me. We built this. We've told stories that changed laws, Dad. We've given voices to people nobody would listen to. Silence stretched, broken only by the soft pop of a balloon brushing the ceiling. Mom reached for his arm. Tom, she murmured, her voice a tremor of hope. He stared at the plaque a moment longer, the lines around his eyes deepening. I didn't know, he said, each word dragged from somewhere reluctant. You never asked, I replied. For the first time in years, he looked at me, really looked, not at the daughter he'd tried to shape, but at the woman who had grown beyond the fences of his approval. Claire slipped her fingers through mine, grounding me. Dad swallowed hard, eyes flicking to Lily, who was now watching from the cake table, wide-eyed and silent. She deserves her whole family, he said finally, the words slow and rough. She deserves love without conditions, I said. Including yours. The room exhaled with me. For the first time, I saw something fragile crack in his posture, not defeat, but the first fracture in a wall he'd built too high. I waited a long beat before speaking, letting the weight of the silence settle. The lake outside shimmered like molten silver, and for a moment all I could hear was the distant lapping of water against the pier. Dad, I said softly, if you want to be part of Lily's life, really part of it, then things have to change. His eyes flickered, a mixture of wariness and a pride he couldn't quite hide. Change how? I tightened my grip on Claire's hand. The locket at my throat felt warm, almost alive. First, you need to respect Claire. Not tolerate. Respect. She is Lily's mother as much as I am. No more side remarks, no more quiet disapproval. He started to speak, but I lifted a hand, this time my own. Second, you have to let go of the idea that success only counts when it looks like yours. You built your life with your hands in the soil. We built ours with words and stories. Both matter. You don't get to dismiss what you don't understand. His jaw worked, but he said nothing. And third, I continued, voice steady though my heart pounded, you must accept that our family is exactly that, a family. No qualifiers. No but. Lily deserves grandparents who celebrate her parents, not hide them. The room was so quiet I could hear the faint creak of the wooden beams above. Dad's gaze dropped to the floor, then slowly rose to meet mine. The stubbornness I'd always known was still there, but it had softened, like ice beginning to thaw. You're asking a lot, he said finally. I'm asking for love, I replied. The kind Grandma believed in. The kind you taught me to expect when I was little, before fear took over. At the mention of Grandma, something shifted. His shoulders sagged just enough for me to see the man beneath the armor. Your grandmother, he murmured, eyes distant. She never gave up on anyone. No, I said, my throat tight. And I won't either. But Lily needs to know that love doesn't come with conditions. If you can't give her that, I can't let you close enough to hurt her. A tremor passed through him, barely visible, but real. Mom stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. Tom, please. He nodded once, slow and deliberate. I can try, he said, the words gravelly and almost fragile. For Lily.
For you.
I felt Claire's fingers squeeze mine. The air seemed to lighten, the lake catching a sudden shaft of late afternoon sun. That's all I'm asking, I said, and for the first time in years, I allowed myself a small, hopeful smile. The sun had started to sink behind the lake when the first candles were lit. Their soft glow gilded the faces around the table, neighbors, friends, children chasing the last traces of daylight. Lily clapped her frosting-streaked hands as Claire lowered the cake, the 8 tiny flames flickering like a constellation. Dad stood a little apart at first, hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets. But when Lily looked over and beckoned with her small pink frosted finger, something in him broke open. He stepped forward, the hard set of his shoulders loosening, and bent so she could whisper her secret wish into his ear before blowing out the candles. I caught the faint smile that tugged at his mouth. It wasn't surrender exactly, more like the cautious beginning of trust. As the party eased into dusk, I wandered toward the pier, the locket warm against my skin. The evening air smelled of wood smoke and damp cedar, the lake lapping a slow rhythm against the posts. Claire joined me, her arm brushing mine. He stayed, she said quietly. For now, I replied, but my voice held no bitterness. Only a calm I hadn't felt in years. Behind us, Dad was helping Lily untangle the ribbons from her new kite. He glanced up just long enough for our eyes to meet. There was apology there, unspoken but real, and something like pride. I touched the locket, feeling the tiny pressed violet inside. Grandma's whisper echoed through the cool night. Live true. I had. Every mile of distance, every hard-won success, every quiet night spent wondering if I'd ever be accepted, it had all led here. To a life built on my own terms. To a family bound not by permission, but by choice. Claire slipped her hand into mine and rested her head on my shoulder. The wind caught Lily's kite and sent it soaring, a bright slash of color against the indigo sky. I smiled, the words rising in me like a vow. I will always choose love without conditions, and that is our greatest success.